Good morning and welcome in to this week's Back to Basics Facebook Live. You may pick up that I have got a bit of a croaky voice today. I've woken up feeling just a little bit on the pants side this morning, but I've got my cup of tea. And I'm thinking that today's video will possibly be on the short side anyway, not just because I might run out of voice, but also because today's topic is probably one of the most important in terms of products I'm going to sort of be looking at in terms of this basics idea. But what we're actually going to be looking at today is the type of stamps. So what my intention is today is not to be talking about how we stamp necessarily, but just in terms of what sort of stamps we have. Hello Chrissy, hope you're okay. Good evening there. It's a nice bright sunny morning here. But yeah, good evening and welcome in. So the plan, as I say today, is to talk about the types of stamps that we have in our selection here at Stamping Up, and really across the board, the types of stamps that you can buy. So stamps, they are the backbone, obviously, of Stamping Up. The clue is in the name, really. You don't have to have stamps in order to create cards. I've been creating cards now for sort of coming on for 18 years, and in the first few years I really didn't do very much stamping. I did decoupage and all sorts of things, but didn't really do very much stamping. But as time has gone on, that has become my passion. And I think the thing about stamping that I love, and I think that sort of takes it away from other sorts of card making, is the very fact that you can take a completely blank piece of paper and from that blank piece of paper you can create something beautiful, and you will have done everything on that piece of paper. You'd have done backgrounds, you'd have put in the images, you'd done the colouring techniques, all of those sorts of things. So it sort of does add to the creative process. So that is I have got to have my cup of tea, Chrissy, particularly this morning, because I don't know how long my voice is going to carry on. But anyway, so stamps allow you that to happen. I'm not really an artist. I can tiddle around and have a bit of a draw, but I would not call myself an artist in any shape or form. And if I do draw, it tends to be copying other images. I don't need to be able to draw because there are fabulous artists that create our stamps and things for us that have done the drawing. They do the drawing. I just need to transfer that drawing using ink and stamps onto a piece of paper. So stamping is huge in my particular crafting world, but we need to think a little bit about what are our stamps and what sort of stamps have we got. And I've got a little pile of stamps in front of me here, and I've got some other little oddments, some sort of bits that you might want next to me as well. So stamps. This little stamp on the top here is quite a long time retired stamp. I just opened my retired stamp cupboard and grabbed out this particular cute little baby bumblebee. He is rather lovely. Now then, this stamp is on a wooden block. We no longer do stamps on wooden blocks, particularly not here in the UK. I think you can still get some in the US, but elsewhere in the Stamping Up world we no longer do stamps with wooden blocks. But this is where sort of crafting stamps started out. They started out as rubber stamps. They weren't necessarily red rubber, but they'd have been rubber stamps mounted onto wood blocks. And if I want to, I could take this stamp off of this wooden block and use it with my acrylic blocks. It's just a question of heating it to melt the adhesive on the back, and then I'd be able to peel that off and put on some cling mount and be able to use it on my acrylic blocks. But for now he's still there on his little wooden block, because that's how he came, and this was sort of the start of stamping. The benefits of having a wooden block is that, you know, it's there and ready to go, just need to ink it up and you're ready to go. But the downside of them, of course, not only have you got to have all that wood, got to chop down a lot of trees to provide all of that wood for your blocks, so environmentally not so good, but also storage. So they take up a lot more room in terms of storage. So if you've got a lot of stamps, storage can become quite a big thing, and that becomes quite a really valid point. If you've got things like stamp positioning tools and things that we'll have a quick flash of in a minute, obviously you can't use these stamps on those. So as I say, Stampin' Up for most of the world no longer does woodblock stamps, but you may well still have some in your cupboard, and they are still very valid, very brilliant, but they are, as I say, a bit more chunky, take up a bit more room. But they were sort of like the history of our stamping, if you like. That's where we started. So, you know, if you went round a craft store 15, 16, 17 years ago more, it would have been the wood mount stamps that you saw. We still very much have red rubber stamps in our collection, and they still are incredibly good quality. There is something about a red rubber stamp that gives you extra edge in terms of quality. They are fabulous. There's techniques that you can do with red rubber stamps that you can't do with the clear stamps. Anything that requires any heat, your red rubber stamp will take quite a lot of heat, whereas obviously if you've got a clear stamp, add too much heat to it and you're going to melt the stamp, which is not a good plan. So if you're doing things like, and you know, these things may all sound double Dutch at this point, but in time, if you're doing things like triple heat embossing and those sorts of things where you're plunging your stamp into molten embossing powder, then you really have to be using red rubber stamps. So the level of detail you can get in a red rubber stamp, although the clear stamps are becoming more and more advanced as time goes on, the level of detail you get in a red rubber stamp is superior, really. But they have their place, and there are reasons why you would want a red rubber stamp. There are reasons why you would want a clear stamp. So I love my red rubber stamps. The red rubber stamps that we sell with Stampin' Up these days are known as cling mount. So you have your labels on the back that is very clingy, and when they first come they're incredibly sticky and you need to very gently ease them. So you may find that they sort of cling really well to your case or to your block, and you need to be very careful just to lift up corners, to lift them off of your blocks and things, because you don't want to tear that rubber. The other thing about the red rubber stamps is that you do get that layer, that squidgy layer just here. So this is your red rubber stamp. So this is actually a stamped image on this red rubber, and then you get this layer of squidgy foamness, and that actually becomes quite important when you're stamping, and that is something that you don't get on clear stamps as well, and we will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we also, when we start stamping with them in a couple of weeks, start looking at tips and tricks to stamping, we should certainly be talking about the benefits of that rubber mat and why sometimes you may need to compensate for it with your clear stamps. So red rubber stamps, beautiful. Obviously price point on the red rubber stamps is slightly higher than the equivalent on the clear stamps, so they are slightly more expensive to produce, so therefore are slightly more expensive to buy. But they last and last and last. They will last you a lifetime if you look after them. They take a whole lot of knocks and all sorts of things, as I say, and they are just fabulous. So those are your red rubber stamps. So you've just got your whatever your image is sort of carved, etched into the rubber, and then you lay a layer of ink on the top, and you then transfer that layer of ink to your paper. That is basically what you are doing. You are inking up that top layer of that stamp and then transferring that image to your paper. That is what you're doing when you're stamping. One of my favourite sayings, and I didn't coin this phrase, I don't know quite where it came from, is that your stamps are tools, not jewels. Now, with some of my stamps, if I was to open some of my stamps up, if they've been used rather a lot, this one is looking fairly pristine. Some of my stamp sets, over time, if they're particularly loved, will start to look a bit stained. They might have, you know, sort of little bits of glitter stuck to them that I can't quite get off, all of those sorts of things. As long as your stamps are functioning, as long as you keep them clean and are functioning, a little bit of staining on them is not going to alter their ability to stamp at all. So it isn't something to get really, really het up about. And this is a particular point when we go to look at the clear stamps in a minute, because they do get stained really quite easily. But that is okay, because it does not interfere with their ability to stamp. And they are tools. They are a thing to use. They are not jewels. The idea is not that you may want to open your box and gaze at them lovingly and put them, you know, on your wall. But actually the idea of them is to be using them to stamp your images. So it doesn't matter if they're stained. It doesn't matter if they look a bit pink or a little black or whatever colour it is they happen to have gone. That's okay. As long as it's not interfered with their functionality, it doesn't matter if they've got a bit of ink on them. What it means is that you have loved them and you have used them, and that's the most important things. So this is the A Good Man stamp set, fabulous stamp set, and as I said about this artist, or some very clever artist, has drawn these beautiful pictures of these men, sort of dads with youngsters, and sort of laying back in the sunshine. I couldn't have drawn that, but I don't need to, because the artist has drawn that. I just need to reproduce that onto paper. So stamps are fabulous. So those are our red rubber cling stamps. I also here have, this is actually an older style one, so this isn't a cling stamp, this is a clear stamp, so I haven't put my sticker on the back, but it is still cling to the block. This is a big background stamp, and these are huge big stamps that you can create whole backgrounds with, or partial backgrounds, or whatever you like. Background stamps are fabulous, but again they come in the red rubber, because you do tend to do all sorts of things to those and beat them about a bit. But fabulous, great big background stamps. The other sort of stamp set that we do are the Photopolymer stamp set. So these are your clear stamps. So you can see what I mean about staining. These have been stamped with, looks like there's been a bit of stays on there. There's a bit of red colour. The red colouring in inks does tend to stamp your stains. So that's not necessarily red ink. It could be purple ink. It could be all sorts of things. But once you've cleaned them, you'll find quite often that the red remains. But that's absolutely fine, because that hasn't prevented that stamp from stamping. Now, Photopolymer stamps are clear. You can see through them. So you can see where it is that you want them to go on your picture that you're creating. And that's what we're creating. We're creating pictures. So with this particular stamp set, we've got, if we take this sort of churn just here, we've got this churn stamp, and then we've got this stamp here with these flowers on. So when it comes to stamping, we can stamp the churn on our card, and then we're going to be able to see exactly where we need to stamp that top section, so it looks as if it's popping out the top of our churn. So for any stamps that want that sort of level of layering up, then Photopolymer is absolutely the way to go. You find that any alphabet stamps and things tend to be Photopolymer, because you need to be able to get all your little words. So if I wanted to put Helen on the front of something, I would need to stamp my H and make sure that I can get my E next to it and my L next to that. So Photopolymer stamps are vital really for that sort of a job. the ones where you need to be able to see through your stamp to line it up. They also are, as I say, a slightly cheaper price point. So if you get really huge sets of stamps, quite often they will come as photopolymer just to make them that little bit more affordable. But just because they are that more affordable doesn't mean that they are not beautiful and stunning. Again, you need your acrylic blocks to go with them, and we'll look at those in a minute. You may find with your photopolymer stamps that, particularly if you're doing things like using embossing powders or glitter or those sorts of things, you might find that they lose their stickiness. But that is not a problem. That is not a disaster, not the end of the world. Simply take them to the tap, give them a good wash under the tap, lie them to one side and let them air dry, and then you'll be good to go again. They will be nice and sticky. Some of these actually are feeling as if they need a little bit of that love and attention. They need taking to the tap and washing. Do make sure you don't lose any of the little ones down the plug hole. So put your plug in, or put them in a bowl or some sort of container. That means you're not going to lose little bits down the plug hole, because that's a disaster. So photopolymer stamps. So we've got our red rubber cling stamps, we've got our photopolymer stamps. One you can see through in order to line it up. The other ones are more sturdy, more robust, tend to get a bit more detail in them, and are fabulous if you're wanting to use anything with heat. So our two different sorts of stamps. With both of our stamps, they are being developed all the time. We've just seen with the Christmas catalogue the introduction of our first ever double-sided stamp, and I'm just having a little quick look on my shelf. I should have grabbed that out and I didn't. Here we are. So the Cup of Christmas, and you can definitely see that I've been using these. Look, and they've gone very pink, but that doesn't matter. But the Cup of Christmas, this is a photopolymer stamp. You can pop it on your block, ink it up, stamp that side, give it a clean, flip it over, ink that side up, stamp it, and you'll have one cup going one way and one going the other. And actually on my desk just here, yeah, there's the cup going one way, there's the cup going the other. So I can make a double-sided cup using my double-sided stamps. So that is a patent pending innovation from Stampin' Up that has just come out in the last autumn winter catalogue. So you've got double-sided stamps. That's an innovation. The other thing that we have are our distinctive stamps, and those have real detail in them, and I haven't got what I shall show you those in a bit more detail when we actually do some stamping in a couple of weeks. And they have like a 3D detail to them just by inking them up and stamping them. Just the way that the stamps have been produced means that just by adding some ink on it and stamping it, you automatically get shading and a real depth of image just from the stamp itself. And we are now starting to get distinctive stamps in photopolymer as well. So all of those clever people at Stampin' Up do fabulous things with stamps, so that we are able to do fabulous things with our cards. So a couple of basics you're going to need with your stamps. One is acrylic blocks. Now these are all our sizes that we have here at Stampin' Up in acrylic blocks. Our acrylic blocks are fabulous. When I first joined as a demonstrator, coming up 6 years ago, I'd already got quite a few acrylic blocks and things, so I sort of put off buying the acrylic blocks for a little while because they weren't an immediate need. But once I did start using them, and I've started collecting them, I now have 2 complete sets, I wouldn't go back. They are a really good weight. The size of the shape of them, with this sort of little indentation, this little groove that goes all around the outside, that means they're really good to hold onto ergonomically. They are just fabulous. Mine are in need of a bit of a clean up, and then you get the lovely case that you can put them in. And mine is in my bag. I've come back from a class yesterday, but you've got a case that you can buy to keep them in, or you can just have them stacked up on your desk, whatever works for you. But you do need an acrylic block with your stamps, just to keep them sturdy and firm. But you just need, you take them on and off, so you just need a few blocks to start with the most regular sizes. And what you will find in the catalogue, when you look in the catalogue at a particular stamp set, let's have a look. There we go. Let's just, this is the stamp set that goes with the Christmas countdown collection, and if we have a look, suggested clear blocks, and it gives you a list of the suggested clear blocks that you might need to go with that stamp set. Often you can get away with not having all of those blocks, and again, when we're looking at how we actually stamp, we will talk about some tips and tricks of what you can do with bigger blocks if you've only got a small stamp on them. The other thing you might find useful, and again we'll talk about this when we're talking about how to stamp, is a foam mat, and the reason for this is the thing that you would use to compensate for the fact that you haven't got that foam layer in your photopolymer stamps. So we'll again be talking about that, but these are sort of tools that you will need to go alongside your stamps when it comes to stamping. The other thing you might like is a stamp positioning tool, but I think we'll save that as a complete video on its own. So that is a bit of an introduction to stamping, the types of stamps. So you've got your red rubber stamp with its cling back, you've got your photopolymer stamps that you can see through and you can line up. We now have distinctive stamps, reversible stamps, you've got your big background stamps, so many different types of stamp. But what they are tools. They are tools to allow you to create your very own little pieces of artwork. And we shall go on, say, in a couple of weeks to start playing with some of these stamps and getting some tips and tricks as to how to get the best out of them. So I hope you've enjoyed that quick introduction. My voice has held out. Woohoo! I'm going to finish my cup of tea, and I will be back tomorrow on my Love-a-Duckie page with my usual Thursday evening Facebook live. So do come and join me then when we're going to be stamping and having a play with a friend like you. So I'm looking forward to that.